I am not exaggerating when I say astrology saved my life. Things that I hated about myself, things that I doubted myself about, question, to the point of like, talk about rumination, talk about anxiety, talk about really, not being able to honor yourself or love yourself. Astrology helped me understand those parts and accept myself.
Welcome to Deconstructing Therapy, transforming therapy and the therapists who lead it. Let's deep dive into conversations, reshaping therapy into a powerful tool for healing, liberation, and systemic change. Join us as we challenge the status quo, reimagine care, and celebrate therapists breaking barriers. Let's transform therapy together. I'm so excited to have my good friend, Dr. Tralana Eugene, on the podcast today. Dr. Eugene is a licensed professional counselor and supervisor, licensed marriage and family therapist, advanced trained emotionally focused therapist, and holistic therapist based in Louisiana. She is the founder of Sage Holistic Counseling and Wellness, where she specializes in story-informed trauma therapy and trauma-focused care. Using a blend of intuitive guidance and practical tools, Dr. Eugene helps clients explore the emotional, mental, and spiritual layers of their experiences. Through an integration of both traditional and non-traditional approaches to psychotherapy, she is dedicated to fostering resilience, empowerment, and holistic well-being. I'm so excited to have you. I know we've known each other for several years now, and I've kind of seen your evolution as a therapist, which has been beautiful to watch. But you are one of the most intuitive therapists I think I really ever have met. It's been such an honor to just even know you. But what I've seen even just in your evolution is how you've integrated more and more of your spirituality, astrology, like different practices. And that's always kind of been a part of you, but to me, I've seen you really own it and embrace it in this different way. And I would love to hear that story of that integration today. Where do we begin? Like, has that always been a part of you?
I would say yes, in some ways. Even as a child, I was always into like sacred sciences, esoteric, type shows, and I was always like attracted to it. But growing up as a Christian, in Southern Baptist Christian, that wasn't really allowed, in some ways. And so I would say like kind of like sneaking it a little bit, but not necessarily being able to ask questions or really understanding how it's used. But I would always, as a newspaper, as a child, like reading the horoscope, always a part of that.
The horoscope, and is that against Southern Baptism?
Well, I'll answer the question in two ways. So I would say yes, traditional Southern Baptist, yeah, absolutely. Astrology, anything that, is kind of outside of the views of Christianity could be considered, not okay, evil. There are different sects, right, of Christianity. And so I have experienced all of them, from like Baptist, Southern Baptist, Pentecostal, non-denominational. I've, experienced a lot of them. And so the rules kind of change depending on that particular leader, that particular group. But yes, in my family, for the most part, that was not.
Was that something that you integrated for yourself, that this is what I believe in? And then did it feel like a disconnect for you when you were drawn to spirituality? Or was it something like, oh, this is just what my family does, but I don't really buy into it?
It's interesting thinking about that question. And so I would say, let's bring it forward into it. I don't blame it all on my mother. And so, she would consider herself to be like, a spiritual person, definitely a spiritual advisor. In her family, she's definitely like the one that's always like preaching and doing a lot of that. But my entire family, it's like the church, is very, very important. However, though, my mom is the one that dabbled even outside of the like Southern Christianity aspect of it. So, Pentecostal, those type of things. So there are some things that like, maybe in the traditional Baptist church, my grandmother's church, that we would not necessarily do. I did experience some of that in other churches. Or, for example, I was always able to celebrate Halloween in my grandmother's church and in my family. However, eventually when we got to, I think it was Pentecostal, like we weren't able to celebrate Halloween. You were asking that question. I'm just like, well, my mom kind of exposed me to this evolving and changing based off of the information that you are provided. And she was actually like, okay with that. Now it all still was in the realm of spirituality. I mean, Christianity. But
there was a little bit of going outside and questioning and So
Exactly.
you witnessed that from her and modeled it from her.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I would say that for sure. And so in college, I would say that's probably where like my first spiritual awakening happened. And I do believe we have many different types of spiritual awakenings. And it was really just being exposed to new information. And I remember being warned by a lot of my family, my aunts and my grandmother, like, all right now, don't you go up there by those people and God is still
Those
God. Jesus is
people.
still Jesus. Exactly, right? And so it's like,
Were you in
okay,
New
sure.
Orleans for college? You
Yes, I
okay.
went to New Orleans. Yes, I was at UNO actually. And I took this course. It was an elective. I think I was just kind of like filling things up. Especially after Katrina, just trying to kind of reshuffle things. And there was this course. I don't remember the name of it, but it was like, the Bible as literature, something to that effect, right? So like just taking the Bible and actually not using it as this like spiritual, document, but like using it as like a way to understand history and understand literature. So I would say that really kind of opened me up. I love history. I love period pieces, even watching TV or movies. I'm always interested in history. And so I would say that, if I could go back to school, I probably would be like an anthropologist. I really just like love studying different people in that way. But my love for history is probably what influenced my spiritual thoughts now, I would say.
And so when you got to experience the Bible in that way, it gave you that historical lens to it.
Yeah, it was kind of like stepping out of myself, stepping out of all the things that I was taught. I used to ask a lot of questions. I was a spiritual child, even though, I was very young and we would be at church a lot, like Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Sunday, maybe multiple times on a Sunday when my mom might be speaking at different churches. I was in tune. I was curious. I would ask questions. I remember feeling, what I would call like the love of God. I remember feeling those things at a really young age, not really fully being able to describe it. Talking to God a lot like God was my friend. And so, even some of those things, I remember like being taught very early in Bible school, like you can't question God. And I remember being like, I'm going to do it. And I did. And so I couldn't help it. But I would ask a lot of questions that a lot of the adults could not answer. Watching these other type of TV shows like Charm and some other shows, it kind of answered some things that I had, but like just other questions just about like, I remember I asked my mom one time, I was like, well, you say that like you have to get baptized in order to go to heaven. And she's like, right? Yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, so what about the child that's like in the mountains that never heard of, right? Like in the jungle. And I remember her and she's like thinking, she was like, well, yeah, I was like, so like that child is not going to go to heaven. And I remember her first answer, she was like, well, no, baby, based off of what the Bible said, that child. And she saw my face and she was like, but, no, if I believe that. So, again, when I think
You
back,
almost made her think and question.
exactly, exactly. She actually told me that, as an adult, one time we were in a car and she was just like, I know that, you've changed some of your beliefs, but, I'm not too far off from where you are. And I'm just
Wow,
like, oh, let's talk about that.
that's pretty awesome.
But, there's always that line, that goes there.
That's interesting because you got that from your mom, but you kind of took it further.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
so interesting. That sounds about right, though.
just
For
that
me,
curiosity and being able to question things and step a little bit outside of the box.
that's it. That's it. Yeah, that was very important to me. To be in a space where I can ask questions is just important.
You said, "Oh, I was watching these things like Charmed and the spiritual stuff, and that answered something that felt like it was missing." What felt like it was missing that got answered there?
I would probably say, like, when you talk about me being intuitive, I felt things that I don't
Okay.
feel like could be explained by, the people around me. I was young in my family giving adults advice. I was always the person that people would come to. People would just gravitate to me. I would always be nominated as like the babysitter. And I remember thinking like, you don't really know me that well, but you're leaving your children with me. Those type of things that I would use astrology to describe, my son being in Cancer, just having that like empathic ability, intuitive ability, just kind of feeling things in my stomach, knowing when something wasn't right, being young and dumb, as they would say, right? And having fun, but like having a feeling like, oof, I think we should leave. And I'm telling my friends, like, I think we should leave. And they're like, no, Tralana, don't be the party pooper. And I'm like, I really think we should leave. and then finding out there was a drive-by shooting. After right
Crazy. So
after
you
we
always had that since you were little, and people knew that. I can't even begin to describe it, but there's been so many times where you have felt something in me before I felt it or realized it, and you would tell me something, and I'm like, it didn't make sense to me, and then like a week later or something, it all like would start clicking into place. How the hell did she even understand that I was there or that I needed to hear a certain phrase? And I'm like, it blows my
I
mind.
actually taught you some of that, Alefyah. Like you taught me that, I had to learn that. And this is what I mean by why I'm so passionate about doing this work and why I feel like even the next group of counselors, that's coming out, or mental health professionals, is like, we have that. Many of us have that on varying levels, but I don't feel like I was taught how to hone that. So, I believe I have done harm. I believe that I have used that skill not appropriately, not realizing that I can just tap into people's stuff and realizing I don't always have permission for that, or sometimes realizing that maybe I'm moving too fast for my clients. Maybe I'm getting information that they had not yet given to me. Even in my friendships and my relationships, like I've had to learn, and I appreciate the validation when you guys will come back and be like, hey, when you said that, I didn't hear it. But then a week later, I'm just like, oh, that's what's going on with me, right? And so you've seen me learn that about myself. I would always be like, oh, I'm usually right about things is what I usually say.
But I can see how you're saying it can be overwhelming to even have that third sense all the time. And you had to cultivate it. And I guess be delicate, I guess what you're saying, right? Of like, how do I give this information? I know I'm picking up on something. I don't want to talk myself out of it.
That's a big part of it. Not only to talk myself out of it, how do I honor that? But at the same time, realizing that, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? How many times have someone said something to you? Think about an elder that just knows things enough and they've said that to you. And you're just like, that's not happening in this relationship. I know this person. And they're like, oh, wait, I was doing that at like 10, and not understanding why that was the case, yeah.
So how did you hone it? How did you honor it? That no, this is real. I'm going to respect when my body's telling me something.
I have, what they call this, like I have a terminal degree in my field, right? And so I've gone as far as, you can technically go. And I still felt like I was missing something. Even in my own personal work, I believe in therapy. You will always hear me say we need therapy. I will always be in therapy. And I felt like things were missing. I felt like my clients, were missing things. Again, as I stated, I've gone through like a couple of spiritual awakenings. So like, after relationships, after divorces, I would elevate in those ways because that is how we elevate, right? We like go to the dark, right? Underground, that seed is growing and we have pressure underneath and hopefully we're doing all the things, watering, sun. So I stumbled upon those type of things. And then I would like learn some things like, oh, that's helpful. Oh, that's helpful, right? And so astrology just kind of came a little bit stronger. And then I started working with an astrologer. There's certain kind of, I call them like holistic assessments now that I use that I was exposed to, years ago, like the Enneagram or human design, but I didn't have time to study that stuff because that wasn't on the NCE or that wasn't going to be what my dissertation was about, right? And so I was exposed to those things. I was always, again, interested in them, but not really fully being able to dive into them. And so after I got some of these degrees and I'm, experiencing some of these other things, I'm like, okay, this is good stuff, but I felt like I was missing things. And so it was my own personal work that I was doing that I realized, oh, this is so helpful. I am not exaggerating when I say astrology saved my life. Things that I hated about myself, things that I doubted myself about, question, to the point of like, talk about rumination, talk about anxiety, talk about really, not being able to honor yourself or love yourself. Astrology helped me understand those parts and accept myself.
Because of the stuff you're saying, it seems like such core what so many of us struggle with, right? The rumination and the self-hatred and the self-doubt and the anxiety. And you're right. I think there's a lot of people who go into traditional kind of therapy and it just feels like it's missing the mark, or it feels like you have to keep working on it or keep doing it to really feel somewhat better, but there's something not really hitting to the core.
That's it. That's it. And, hey, like, again, you and I talk about, like, there's just this balance between this science world and these words and validating in this other world. For example, like doing my own trauma work deep into it, I realized, like, I think I have ADHD, right? Like, I think this is really a thing. And me not realizing that if I would have continued on the path without really accepting ADHD, there are so many things that I would have labeled as my trauma and undeveloped stories that was really just my ADHD, that hypervigilant part of me, the part of me that when I turn my computer off and I'm like, what's the next thing? That wasn't necessarily because, my trauma has taught me to be a caregiver and I just can't, I don't love myself for, right? It's just like, I have a lot of energy and, I have to learn how to like focus those things. And
So how did you experience that differently? And I think a lot of people who have ADHD have that experience. And if you go to traditional therapy or somebody who is not equipped to understand that, they are going to just put it in a trauma lens or an attachment lens of like, oh, this is a part of you that's over functioning and that needs to just calm down or be processed or whatever.
exactly. Go do more self-love. You just need to love yourself a little harder, Tralana. And I'm like, I love myself. I take care of anybody else, but I can't, I can't sit down. This just happened around New Year's. We were like having fun. My sisters and I, we cooked some meals and they were like sitting down and I was, kind of looking around, looking at the time, waiting for 12. And I'm going to get the champagne glasses. Then I wipe the champagne glasses. Then I check the freezer to see if the champagne is in there. Then it's like, well, let me just open it. Let me just get these napkins out. And they were just like, Tralana, sit down. Why can't you sit down? And I was just like, right. Why can't I sit down? Right. And then understanding that, being a woman of color, being a Black woman, being an indigenous origin, like I actually understood that a lot of these goals, a lot of these degrees, a lot of these like check that list, check that mark and staying busy, it was not diagnosed because, those were good things. Coming from a first generation family, let alone going to college, let alone getting a PhD was like a big thing. Everyone saw my accomplishments as like, go Tralana, right? Like you're making us look good, not understanding that it had nothing to do with my trauma necessarily, or nothing to do with the fact that I was first generation and this was something that my family did not do. But it had everything to do with the fact that I could not rest. I could not sit down physically. I could not do it. So after all the therapies and thousands of dollars in therapy and then learning all these different models. And I'm just like, so what's wrong with me? Right. And then that's the thing, right? So what's wrong with me? Why do I feel broken? Why do I still have all this anxiety? And then learning that with ADHD, anxiety and depression, that's typically misdiagnosed, right? It's just like, oh, I have the anxiety because I'm feeling all of these things. I have the depression because I'm struggling with motivation, and then not wanting to take medication, and then the stereotypes and the shaming around that. It was some of that work. Again, when I say it was like relief, this ADHD diagnosis, it took so much pressure off me to perform. And then kind of integrating it with like understanding my Enneagram and understanding my human design type. Those things helped me not always feel that it was this unresolved story or, again, like Freud would say, my mom's fault.
So before, when you had this unexplained energy, would either get validated by everybody and saying, oh, no, that's great, you're just accomplishing more. And, our capitalistic mindset of like productivity is wonderful, that's the to be. Or it would get shamed to this is your mother's fault, this is your caregiver over functioning, you can't do this. And so when you started seeing this energy as something more innate in you, how did you experience that differently? What do you do with it?
It's going to sound a little cliche, but you know how they say honor it. I just was listening to something before. They were talking about like, what does that actually mean to like sit with your emotions? It means I'm not trying to fix it. Like I'm getting chills right now, right? Like it means I'm not trying to fix it. It means I'm just going to sit with it. So sometimes it looks like I am just sitting with it. Sometimes it means I need to process it. There's this really good book called Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Love that book, right? So like sometimes I am processing through is it capitalism? Is it this like machine that I've been conditioned to believe that I have to be doing something? Is it my attachment stuff? Sometimes it's just not any of that, right? And I'm just like, this is just the way my body is. And Sometimes it means I need something. So I might go outside and literally put my feet in the grass because I need to ground. Or sometimes I just need to be uncomfortable and just let it pass through me, or eventually forget that it's happening, or zone out and Netflix and chill. My body actually knows what I need. It was actually some of that work too, and doing a lot of work around trauma-informed therapy, and then being exposed to somatic therapy. We have a really good friend that teaches us a lot about that, right? And so realizing that even as a Black person, there's so much dissociation from my body, going to some of these trainings, and you're just like, and then ask your client, where do they feel it in your body? And I'm just like, my clients are not going to be able, I can answer
They
that
can't.
question.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even know. Don't
Yeah,
even know. But
exactly.
I want to slow down for a moment because I love the way you just described how you accept it, because a lot of people say that, oh, just accept your emotions, sit with your emotions. And a lot of times when we say that, we still think we have to understand them. And you don't. The way you described it right now, like, yeah, maybe it's coming from my trauma, maybe it's coming from my attachment history, maybe it's, and she's like, it was almost like, I don't need to figure that out. But it's still there, and I need to just validate my body is telling me it's there. And it sounds like you just leaned really hard back into your body with it. Of like, it's here. I'm not going to judge it. I'm not going to applaud it to death or shame it. It is here. It is just here. What does it need? Sounds like you just let your body lead you there. I'm not going to go to my head and try to figure this out.
Yes, which is hard. One of my teachers this morning, I was listening to Stormy Grace. She's an astrologer, and one thing she says, she's like, your body never lies. Your body never lies to you. That's not what I would believe. It would be like, no, especially experiencing all these sensations, again, as a Cancer who feels all these things in her stomach, or, as a generator, and if I'm using the terms of human design, we feel it in this part of our body. But there has been times when I felt something and I did something and it didn't work out. But that may not necessarily mean that you needed to do something about it, right? Even right now, there's just a lot of things happening astrologically. That doesn't necessarily mean that we do something about it, right? Mercury is in retrograde, and it just actually means you should slow down and just go back and review. And the information that's coming up right now, this is actually not the time to do anything about it, right? It's actually time, in a little bit, but it's just time to receive. And I think, I talk a lot about the divine feminine and divine masculine, the divine feminine, which I believe we all have a part in, right? Are part of us. Sometimes we just need to receive. Sometimes that information is just there for you to get the download, and you are not supposed to, as you say, process it, go up to our heads. And we have good reasons for it, why we would want to do that. I don't think we're taught to just sit and be uncomfortable. You and I talk a lot about, the Jedi, right? Justice, and DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion. And oftentimes what we're telling people is, I don't want you to fix this for me. I know you said something that made me uncomfortable, but you don't have to fix this for me. But we'll just be uncomfortable together.
And there's so much power in just being uncomfortable. And I can just hear from the way you're saying, I can hear you honing this power in the way you're talking about it. You're like, yeah, it was always there since I was little. And then when I accepted it, I'm like, okay, cool. I have the superpower. Let me go run with it or do something. And then it took you even another layer of growth to be like, no, yes, it's there. I can accept that it's real. I can accept that it's valid. And I have this ability, but I still sit with it. Just really sit with it. And I could see there's probably layers of how to really get there.
Yes. And again, I want to reiterate, that is not easy. I think every day I'm learning how to do it a little bit better, a little bit differently. Sometimes I need help with it. Sometimes I need my astrologer or my therapist or my spiritual, mother to remind me. And then sometimes I can remind myself. Or sometimes I do something that doesn't feel right, and I'm like, that wasn't the answer, right? And so it's okay.
That's good too. It's like, let me try this out. If I make a mistake, okay, keep on moving.
Keep on moving.
And just listen to your body. Did you feel like a disconnect from, the way we're taught astrology stuff is always stigmatized a lot in the mental health field. I think there's more acceptance of it now, not where we need to be, but it's getting there. But when we were in school and stuff, it feels like it's almost two completely disconnected worlds. So how did you get to this integration piece? Did you fully step into the way the Western model was and then have to evolve to this? Did you always integrate those pieces in your work?
I think what I did was call it different things. Eventually, when I was fully into astrology, when I was using it in my day-to-day practices, talking about it with people that I felt comfortable with, I was saying the same thing, right? I might even ask a person, I'm talking, when's your birthday? Oh, okay. Oh, you're a Virgo. Okay, gotcha. right? And I like may not necessarily say that out loud, but there might be something that I'm using that information around. What's really eerie is just that like people found me. I started to notice that like it's like once you put it out there, once you fully step into yourself, you'll realize that the world will validate you. And then I was the problem. I realized that I was holding on to these identities. I was afraid to tell my colleagues, they're like, using astrology with my clients. I would say it to some people that I feel safe with. I remember you were one of the first people that, I would say it to. As you know, like that was not okay. I was afraid that people wouldn't refer to me anymore. I was worried about what my other clients would think. People tell us their truth in our sessions. Yeah, for a while, I was kind of doing this thing where it's like, well, this is kind of what I also offer. If you're open to it, because I was taught like you cannot just put yourself, project your beliefs on your clients. And I still believe that. And at the same time, I'm now at a place where it was taking so much of my energy to be this like fragmented version of me. There's like the Tralana, the professional. And then there was this like spiritualist. In some ways, I felt like I was being misleading to my clients by just being able to compartmentalize. Some ways I felt like I was validating them. But what I realized as having some health issues, that was actually killing me, right? That like the burnout of this dissociation in so many areas of my life, I couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. Okay. I really want to slow down with that because you just named so many things that I went through that I think even got clearer for me in my head as you said that. Because the dilemma of, okay, if I'm fully myself and I do this astrology and this is who I am, it feels more whole to you. But am I projecting all this onto somebody else? We're taught, and for good reason, it is valid. You want to be where they're at. If they're using spirituality, we'll use their spirituality. If they're more secular, okay, we'll use where they're at, use their strength for them, which is so valid. But then it starts grinding at who you are. It starts like taking away from your own integrity the more you had to not have it in the room.
And then when you said, I realized like that was a part of my identity. Like I wanted to be the type of, I saw myself as this eclectic person. Even when trying to choose a theory in school, I was like, I like all of them, and so I don't really like to be boxed in. I am a traditionalist, but I don't like to be boxed in. And so I like the part of my identity that said that I can do, the secular way, I can do traditional, I can do non-traditional. And again, it's a trade-off, not really realizing the energy that I was using to take all of those different identities, right?
So how does that show in the room, say there's somebody who's not spiritual, who doesn't believe in astrology, and then this is a core part of who you are, and you want to honor who they are and meet them where they're at. How do you deal with that dilemma in the room?
Surprisingly, I have a lot of people, I would say on my caseload probably does not believe or, in astrology in that way. And again, they have no problem letting me know. So one, it's the rapport. I hope I do a good job of making sure that my clients feel comfortable enough to tell me. I also hope that my clients understand that when I, those first couple of sessions, when I am like, before you even tell me your stuff, let me tell you who I am. And so now, I start off by saying this, I start off by saying I have a poly mindset. I start off by saying I'm an astrologer. I'm, a holistic astrologer. Even with trauma, right? There are some things where the way that we're trained, if you're a trauma-informed therapist, you have a different view. And so just like I would have to give informed consent around that, because it's going to come back up, right? As an attachment therapist, it's going to come back up. Again, that's why it's like, it's misleading if I'm not telling you where I'm pulling these things from. And my clients just respected me more for it. They might say like, I'm not into it, but like, it doesn't help you, help me. A lot of times I would also say, well, let me explain it to you in this way. Take what you need and leave the rest. And so there are some people that I would go through their chart, their natal chart, and then it'll be like, wow, I didn't believe in this stuff, but there's something to that. And so I tell people it's just like a personality test. If you take it, it's just like any other assessment. You don't have to believe in it, one, for it to be true. And if it helps you understand yourself, even if it helps you understand what you don't believe about yourself, it helps you name that. There's power in that as well. But the most part is just like me explaining to people, this is who I am. There are so many other therapists out there. And that was scary for me to say in the beginning, but there's so many other therapists out there. And, again, when you're trying to get your license and you need those hours, I did not feel comfortable doing that. And I have guilt around that, right? It's just realizing it's a part of the system. It's a part of the like hustle and bustle of to get my license so that I could be, validated. But then realizing now, like, I thank goodness I have the privilege that I don't have to do that. And I have a list of many wonderful therapists where it's like, if I am not for you, right, you can go and see one of these people.
Right. You don't have to be the perfect fit for everybody. Just like we are in every relationship, right? You're not perfectly aligned or have a relationship with everybody, but you can't keep tearing away at who you are and be this blank slate. It doesn't exist.
Oh, that is probably, one of the like top, harmful concepts that I would say, like, as a therapist that we're taught, like, one, that we don't have an opinion, or, we don't have an identity. And I'll honestly tell you, a lot of it came from seeing a lot of like Christian therapists that could name themselves as Christian therapists.
Then that gave you permission to start naming.
Exactly. It's like, oh, you can do it,
You can do
right?
it. Yeah.
Then
Why can't I do that with
I
astrology?
gave
Why can't? That's so valid. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Now, that's, again, still scary because we understand that there are some norms, and when you're a part of the majority, you have certain privileges and, protections. And so now, again, like as you stated, these things are kind of coming up. And I think you and I were talking before, there's like a tarot workshop where you can get like CEUs. And I'm just like, okay. Like, on one hand, I'm like, I love it. I'm here for it. On the other hand, I'm just like, and so there's room for us all. I'll say that. If we can not take this thing that has always been there and call it by a different name without honoring the origins where it comes from, and or taking the soul out of it, sterilizing it and making it very cookie cutter.
So that's where your came from about the CEU. They're like, oh, good, it's getting validated, but then there's a little fear of, is this going to become sanitized? Are we going to really honor where it comes from? Because that happens with so many things.
We were talking about like how paramedics came to be in like the 1960s or 70s in Pittsburgh. This Black organization basically started, out delivering food, and then they started delivering medical supplies, and then that led to, this group of people training themselves to deliver emergency services. And it was amazing. They did, so phenomenal. People from everywhere came to learn, under them. And then the mayor of that city was just like, oh, this is amazing, right? We're going to take this system and we're going to bring it all the way to the top. That system now is literally how our, in the US, how our emergency paramedic services are, that's the template. Many of us don't know that. And that's like, although that's hurtful, that's not the saddest part. The saddest part is those people that started the organization, like, they wiped them out, fired them, and then put all white people in those same positions, right? That's what I'm hoping we do not do.
That's a great example. And I had no idea about that till you taught me that history. I'm so grateful for that knowledge. But yeah, look how bizarre. It's like a Black organization started this. Now you're going to remove them from it completely. And likely Black people learned how to do this because they were not given access to care. So they had to, out of survival, had to learn how to do these very important survival strategies, and actually took that, organized it, and made it available to everyone. I mean, that's beautiful. That's amazing that they did that. And then they were cut away from it. And even till this day, they are being discriminated against from that exact system that they originated. Like, that's colonization. That's right there. And that happens in so many aspects. So I can see your hesitancy if you see the astrology being, I mean, I see that, with so many Indian practices, yoga, I'm like, oh, you kind of took the heart out of it. And now you're making it still into this Western concept of trying to get people to not slow down and get their body in a certain way. And you're taking
very perfectionistic, get the move right. And oh, yes, that's a great example. Yoga is another example of that. It's like, it's naturally going to do those things, right? But it's really, trying to get you to be more connected to your body, more integrated. And y'all are dissociating us. You're taking the connection out of it.
So how do we do this? Because that's a beautiful concept of, we want to honor these things. And I like how you think there's room for both. We don't want to come in and say, look, we got to go completely back to where we just listen to these spiritual practices and, like, let's forget science. There's a lot of wonderful things that making things research-based and organized and evidence-based in that process, like, it creates a lot of standard norms that are effective. And it's a wonderful thing. But how do we integrate the two? How do you integrate the two in a way that's honoring?
That's what I'm trying to figure out now. That is what I'm passionate about now. That is what I want to teach, the next, again, group of mental health professionals. And I've even like tried to figure that out. There's like certain schools that I feel like are trying to kind of do this now, kind of bringing in like Carl Jung and trying to introduce the soul back into psychology. And again, we don't want to just kind of take everything back. I really am a systems person. I do believe that every solution has a problem. I have experienced spiritual abuse before. I know firsthand what happens when you do not have boundaries, right? When you do not have rules, so to speak. When everything is subjective, I am a scientist. I identify as a scientist. I will always keep that. I'm so grateful for, what I've learned, right? As like a traditional, psychology or counselor. And I've also learned in my searching and in realizing like, oof, my clients need more. And now I need to go like, I've done 20 years of study here. Now I gotta go try to catch up over here. And then, I stumbled upon this ancestor constellation. You might hear it also called like family constellation workshops, where they are understanding the unconsciousness patterns and the psychological patterns between family dynamics. And I stumbled upon this workshop. So it's family dynamics, right? A family constellation. The person that I am learning under, changed this word and brought it back to its roots and call it ancestor constellation. It'll feel like magic, right? It'll feel like, there's no way this stuff is real, right? And I would say like, I probably won't do it justice if I really explain it. I think it's Bert Hellinger is the one that brought it to I would say the U.S., but it was used a lot to help families, that experienced the Holocaust. It feels magical in terms of being able to, when we talk about healing generational trauma from like, thinking about the ancestors and thinking about, how our indigenous people was influenced and how they are actually still influencing us today. So again, it's beautiful work. It is all over the world. And it was actually started or originated by the Zulu people in Africa. And so what's happening is like, I'm going, Alefyah, going to these different, whether it's an astrology workshop, whether it's a intuitive workshop to kind of build my intuitive abilities, stumbling upon this ancestor workshop where Nani is the facilitator. And I'm listening to this person, she's from London, and I'm just like, all right, I can definitely like give you her information because she's absolutely amazing. And I'm just like, wait. So how long have you, been doing mental health? And she's like, I've never been trained as a mental health, person. I was like, there's just no way. You're using concepts and words that I have like took years to learn, and you're just doing it, right? These people have been doing this from the beginning, right? And so again, history has helped me accept these things about myself. When I think about who are the people that was in charge of mental health? It was the sages. It was the oracles, right? It was the spiritual leaders. They were responsible for that community. They were responsible for the mind, body, and spirit. And I understanding hearing the stories of why that got kind of sucked out, why there's been a lot of rules and we've kind of dissociated and fragmented. However, though, even in our own field, we are fragmenting from social workers and psychologists to, therapists. It's just like, I don't agree with you. Let's call it a different name. I don't know if that's the way to do it anymore. And so I would say the privilege of us understanding and being able to look where we are right now and see the history. What we can do right now is see what works, see what does not work, and understand that question, we will constantly come back to that question. That's what astrology teaches us. I know a lot of people, they're just like, well, I'm my sign and this is who I am. And they think that that's what astrology is. Like, no. You're supposed to be progressing. You're supposed to, evolve, right? You're supposed to take the shadow sides of that sign and constantly be working on them for the rest of your life. And so I think that's what we should be doing. We need to go back and look at who started some of these theories, who was studied by some of these theories, these theories, like who was it serving? And then realizing it wasn't people that look like you and I. And so I realized that's why it wasn't working for the people that I was working with. And so it's like, let's take what worked, but let's also come back and take some of these principles that's been there for ages, that still works. And let's find a way to do this in a still evidence-based way.
Yeah, I like how you're saying that, because there's room for both. You don't want to completely overcorrect and go back, and you're saying there can be spiritual harm there when there's no objectivity. But when you step into this
place of just everything so objective and black and white.
Yes. If I can't prove it, it's not real. It's like, oh, that's not actually true either. And let's be real, that's not what's happening. You guys are, doing that. I think I shared with you, I was in a training and they're describing this word. And this is someone that I respect. I would take this person's training over and over again. And they're just describing this and, they're pointing here, they're showing a picture of the human body and they're like, the limbic resonance system. And I'm just like, the third eye? Is that, excuse me? Like that, we've been calling it that for the longest. Thank you now for validating that. I'm so grateful that science has now come up and try to validate something that you could not explain. And let's also honor the fact that there have been people that have been using this word for a long time that you have shamed and told them that it wasn't true. Let's come back and correct that, right? That's that Jedi work. Like we have to go back before we can do the diversity, the equity, and the inclusion. You have to go back to justice. And so I think even in spirituality, I'm very passionate about like social justice spirituality, right? Like we have to go back and do the justice work around spirituality because we have taken things in my field and we are not honoring where they came from.
Can you really expand on this? Because this is such a huge, important point of why is it important to do the justice work and why we need to have that as an add-on and what's the harm done when we kind of try to skip over that and just try to create this appearance of diversity or inclusion or
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, one of my favorite courses to teach is social justice. And so, one of the things that I've learned is, how do I say this? It's like you're trying to tell a person how much they owe you without actually going back to get an account for how much they owe you. Right. And so it's just like, yeah, here's this loan and I'm going to forgive this loan. It's like, okay, great. Let's forgive the loan. But how do you know what you're actually forgiving? And hey, I get it. Who wants to go back? I can tell you right now, there's some like reconciling of my finances that I need to do for March. I don't want to do that, right? It hurts to go back time and time and put yourself back there. Like our body sometimes resists that again. We feel those things, right? Like our body's always right. And how can I actually forgive something without really knowing what I'm forgiving? What's going to happen is that we're going to repeat those things. We're seeing it now, right? We're going to repeat those things. When we just leave cookie crumbs there, when you leave things like insects are going to come in and kind of get that, like you're going to have that kind of problem. Every solution has a problem. And so when we don't really fully take an account of what was lost or stolen, you're likely to repeat it again. And you're likely to, we think about why they tell you take all of your antibiotics, right? Like even if you feel better, finish taking your antibiotics because you're still leaving some germs there, right? And if you don't, it's going to multiply even if you can't see it.
You can't rush past it. I like that analogy with the loan. Because if you're just paying, oh, yeah, I know I owe you. Let me just hurry up and pay you back. You're doing it to just appease the other person and make that debt go away. But you're not really sitting with the stock of, wait, what do I owe you? What was the cost of you being in debt for that long? And what was the debt? And then I can really repay you.
Yes, I didn't really repay you. Or maybe you don't hurt that person again, right? You've learned that, but you might then take another loan from somebody else and do the same thing, right? So now you're just hurting people all over, not realizing, hey, like I gave you that money. I gave you that money for a certain amount of time. I wasn't expecting you to keep it that long, all right? Or me having to like hound you to come and get that. Have you ever had to experience that before? It doesn't feel good.
Right. I mean, we do this work all the time when we do attachment injury repair, when we do affair work with people. It's like, wait. You can't just say sorry for what you're doing. Can you sit in the shoes of the harm that you created and feel it in your body and really understand what that other person went through? Then you won't do the harm again.
The wisdom is there, right? There's wisdom in that. Guilt allows you to not actually repeat that. Shame, right? You're likely to identify with it in a way that you're likely, you're going to repeat that. And so many times, even I can say, like, we shame people for the harm that we've done, right? We've shamed people for racism. We've shamed people for colonization. And I mean, we've seen how that has worked thus far. I don't think it's working. I don't think we're going to get there, right? But if we sit in that discomfort with them, if we allow them to actually see like, hey, you hurt me, like let's share this burden together. We know that when we share the burden together, it physically impacts how it impacts us, right? Like there's like a shared version of it that doesn't cause so much trauma when you share that together, right? We think that we're perfect, or we think sometimes because we are the people that like have been oppressed, but hurt people hurt people. And when you are always pointing the finger, and when you've never had to sit under that cherry tree yourself, it's very easy to just kind of shame people for like what they did wrong.
Guilty of that myself. But yeah, that makes sense. And the shame's coming from a valid place, right? Because it's like, this pain is so big. I want you to experience that. It's coming from a yearning of wanting to do what you said so brilliantly, of like, we want to experience this together so we can lift out of it together. But the shame is just tossing it back and forth.
It's your problem. That's not my problem. It's your problem. You did this and I did this. And it's like, again, like you said, we have good reasons for it, but it just doesn't help.
And again, it feels similar to what you've been talking about earlier, to just a really slowing down. A lot of this growth comes from that slowing down. Can we sit with that pain? Can we not try to shame it and throw it out on somebody else or bypass it in this way or that way? We really sit with it with that curiosity and honor it.
And understand that we don't always know the answer. It's like, how many times you and I have had difficult conversations with people that we love, and they're like, what could I do? Not that they're like, you can't fix that, right?
And if you try to fix it so quickly, you're bypassing it. Can we really sit in the discomfort alone, like you said earlier? For yourself, you have to sit with it, even when your gifts were downloading in you like crazy. You're like, oh, I still got to sit with it. I don't got to run with it right now. And can we do that in community? Can we do that in relationship? When discomfort hits, can we just sit with it?
Yes. And I think we do that all the time. I think many of us, whether you're put in a situation or not, I definitely, as someone that saw myself as like, an expert in Jedi, and I would like give a lot of solutions, right? If we're using attachment language, like, I definitely would give, as the fixer, I would give you all these things. Do this, do this, do this. And you should do this and put this in your PowerPoint and you should say this. And then they would do it. And I'm like, that's not it. Like, it doesn't feel good. But then you put the other person in a situation where it's like, and if you've been in a relationship, like everything I do is not working, right? It's like nothing works. And so I get that. And I think we are also doing that on a macro level around a lot of these issues. We're just throwing things out there when we need to just slow down and realize how we got here.
So true. And this is something that, our good friend Christine, who's been on the show too, has taught me, and I'm still learning because I have a fixer and tell everybody the answers that I just learned yesterday. But sometimes there's hopelessness in that and sitting with it. And that's not a bad thing, because it's an honoring of how big that discomfort is.
If shame worked, like that's where it would be appropriately, right? Like the hopelessness of, this is so messy. How did we get here? How, when you think about the Holocaust, when you think about, slavery, was like, oh, that's so messy. Like, how did we get here? There's just a hopelessness in that. And that alone makes you not want to do that again, or at least I hope, right? When you can just sit with like, hey, there could be something in your future that you can never fix. You will never be able to repay. There's not enough reparation in the entire globe, right? In this galactic system to repay that debt. That alone can allow us hope to like make a difference. Slow down.
Slow down. When it feels uncomfortable, just slow down and sit in it. So much wisdom from you today. I'm so grateful for everything. I know that there's like 30 different aspects we can go into after this, but I really do appreciate your wisdom and your way to articulate these things has helped me out so many times. If you had a takeaway from today's conversation, one piece that you wanted to have people hold on to, what would that be?
So I'm a traditionalist, right? Like I have this Cancer energy, and it's in the 11th house. And so some astrologists don't necessarily subscribe to this, but it's like some of us believe that every house kind of has a zodiac sign that like rules that energy, right? So if you think of the 11th house as being like Aquarian energy, very innovative, very rebellious, energy. So you have this like traditional sign and this like non-traditional house. What I would say is, remember that like at one point we thought the world was flat. At one point, dinosaurs were ruling the earth and we didn't think that they exist. We have to go back and check what we believe. Particularly right now, Venus is in retrograde and Mercury's in retrograde. Like this is the time where we're supposed to be going back to like review what we believe. And don't be afraid to let those things go. Again, as a spiritualist, I have changed so much. And I'm not saying that work is easy. It is hard. You have to ask yourself hard questions, right? It might be tearful. There's grief that you may have to work through. But just remember that like you might have to go back and evolve and change that belief. And that is actually how we progress. It's when we hold on to these things that just was always true or we always did it that way. I think that's why we get stuck. Don't be afraid to evolve and change, and to find your people, right, that align with you so you're that change that you want to be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
This is so great. I really appreciate this.
Oh, also just where can people find you?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram, Sage HCW. My website is sagehcw.com. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook there. I do newsletters, blogs, natal charts, all the things. But yeah.
Thank you.
Join the movement and keep the conversation going at deconstructingtherapy.com. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Deconstructing Therapy. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you are able to and would like to help sustain the podcast, you can find us at buymeacoffee.com/deconstructingtherapy to show your support. Thank you for listening.